Chapter 41 Devil's Wind. Living on a vineyard is a great place to be during a pandemic, and we try to find little things to celebrate. Today is around June 10th, and it started as one of the most beautiful mornings you could ever imagine in California, and then the winds picked up, the Santa Ana. Let me show you what those winds look like. Here they are right here in this picture. Look at the flag in the background. You see how it's blowing? Now, in the afternoon, we have this. Look at the smoke. Yes, wildfire, fanned by winds in early June. Well, it being very hot today, with humidity dropping to single digits and temperatures above 90 degrees, relatively warm for this time of year, unseasonably warm. And so what could the winemaker do but go to the vineyard and make homemade sangria? So we grew our own, made our own, we drink our own with estate Tempranillo and port wine for sweetness, organic peaches, apples, and tangelos. It's really delicious. So cheers to all of you. It's happy hour here. And then let's get to the story. Chapter 41 Fire or Flood. When waters rise onto your lawn, up the steps, and knock at the front door, it's time to go. The body is waterproof, and human nature is resilient. So you wade through the water to bring your family and pets to safety and to check on neighbors. Floodwaters aren't going to kill you unless your backyard suddenly becomes whitewater rapids that pull you under. At least water isn't going to burn you. Even with doors and windows locked, the unwelcome guests enter, and when they recede, leaving a calling card of mud, debris, sewage, and hazardous waste, the house, sorely wounded, develops gangrene. The scourge of mildew spoils anything left behind. Spores of free-dried black rot rehydrate and rot everything. When you return to assess the damage, at first you're relieved to see your house standing. But cancer has invaded, metastasized, drywall sucking it from the floor up into the epidermis and the house's lymph nodes. Only invasive radical surgery can save it. You have your house, but you don't. You need to rip out everything. Furniture, carpet, floorboards. If water covers tile for a day, it's beyond repair, and then the walls. Perhaps some framing can be kept, but it must be treated with strong disinfectant. When I was a curious toddler, Mom left an iron on the ironing board, and I learned to respect and after that a hot stove, as my fingertips turned white from second-degree burns. Did you ever touch an iron? Can you imagine how much more it hurts to place an iron on your forearm or thigh? Makes me cringe. Y'all have your hurricanes, Carrie Ann said to Jenny Lee in Texas over the phone, and we have our fires. I'll take the fire. Be careful what you wish for, sugar, cautioned Jenny Lee. I still say the good thing about having your house flooded is you can go back and pick up your photos, silverware, and mementos. When your house burns down, you lose everything. The time to be on alert was when temperatures rose, humidity dropped, and winds blew from the east, reminding Paul of Mongolian winds that blew across China carrying dust from the Gobi Desert to Beijing. Sheila was reminded of the Mistral winds of Provence and southern France. Stephanie teased Carrie Ann Santa Ana's are the revenge of the Mexican generalissimo who screams across the land to reclaim the Texas territory his army lost to Sam Houston at the Battle of San Jacinto thanks to the Yellow Rose, her namesake. Miguel called them Santana, or devil winds that brought fire from hell. After Carrie Ann heard that, in October, when temperatures rose and winds picked up, she turned on the music of Carlos Santana, took off her clothes, and salsa'd and cha-cha-cha'd to the rhythms and riffs while absorbing vitamin D and having her hair naturally blown out in the privacy of her back porch. When people asked Carrie Ann where her winery is located, she answered, "Out in the countryside, where cougars roam free and fires burn." Fire is a fact of life in the back of your mind until you see billowing smoke clouds and the apocalypse suddenly becomes real. Wildfire destroys almost everything in its path, converting slumbering stored carbon into dancing flames, light and heat. Oh, the heat! An inferno, turning glaze on pots to glass, melting metal, carbonizing cars, breaking bonds binding materials and molecules together, releasing energy, sucking in oxygen with the force of a black hole, and exhaling smoke, smoke and smoke. Fire keeps moving, fanned, whipped, accelerated by the wind, like a shark that must keep swimming or perish, searching for fuel to feed the beast, an earthly incarnation of evil and destruction. Fire is fickle, and without explanation might pass over your house, or if you cleared your property with defensible space, might turn towards an unfortunate neighbor. Then again, fire may throw grenades of embers at your fortified home from afar, singling you out, yours, the best prepared, yet only house on the block to burn. A massive wildfire in San Diego County or anywhere in California could consume 1,000 or more homes. On the other hand, the 1-2 combination punch of stalled hurricane and wind surge could damage 100,000 Texas homes. The body is waterproof. Waters that turn roads into rivers are repelled by the skin, and dirt can be rinsed away with soap. Yet that same skin is not fireproof. The smell of burned flesh, a macabre barbecue for the fiend of fire, the blistering, painful peeling of raw, melted skin is excruciating agony. And that's just the beginning. Weeks, months, even years later, countless operations, skin grafts, suffering. Fire or flood? "I'll take fire," said Paul, regretting his marks the second after he spoke, not wishing to bring it on, recalling God's promise to Noah after the biblical flood. "Next time, never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth," to which Paul added the postscript, "Next time I'll get you with fire." During the Great Recession, Paul did everything in his power to save their house from foreclosure, using ends to justify the means, with continuing consequences to his domestic tranquility. Yet, when Sheila began dropping hints about moving to an apartment in the city with closer access to medical care, not once did she mention selling the home she intended to keep for Kate and Alex, although they showed no interest. Everything she and Paul had worked for, dug and posted, ripped and replaced, planted and grown, harvested and vented, could be consumed by flames fueled by the devil's wind with a satanic wave of the pitchfork. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Did the wannabe monk on the hill honestly not care about losing all his possessions? Would he, Sheila, and Bluey evacuate in the face of fire? Or, if Paul stood his ground to defend their property, would his heirs save the cremation expense? Paul knew a fire was coming as surely as the sun would rise. The only question was when. "I'll worry about it when I see it," and from his perch on a mountaintop, he and Bluey were in a good position to see one coming. "If it comes from the west, it's going to race up the valley," he imagined, plotting a battle plan. "Follow coyote trails up the canyon to our property and find the land cleared except for grapevines. Fanned by ocean breezes, humidity will be higher, temperatures lower, and firefighters will establish a defensive perimeter around the vines protecting the house. If it comes from the south, the fire needs to burn through the city of Escondido before reaching here. That's a good barrier and not going to happen. But if it comes from the east, powered by Santa Ana's, all bets are off. At least we'll see it coming. Right, Bluey?" The devil and Grim Reaper love a good bet and got to work. conspiring to get that dog. Everyone in Southern California knows the warm, dry conditions of the Santa Anas, as temperatures rise sometimes to triple digits, while humidity drops to single digits. If there were truth in this saying, but it's dry heat, that's true of the Santa Ana. For living along the coast of San Diego, usually relatively cool with ocean-induced humidity, the Santa Ana is a burst of summer and fall. Up at Blue Merle Winery, it was a vacation escape, a time to enjoy warmth outside and inside before winter turned their cozy home into a frigid rabbit hole since their heater didn't work. It was the best possible weather in the world, if it didn't kill you. Good time for sangria, too. Santa Ana is synonymous with desert heat that travels from Arizona, carried by winds that blow leaves off grapevines and branches from trees. The trees sway, palm fronds hang on horizontally in the wind tunnel, tumbleweeds roll with gusts causing vines and branches to dance with abandon. A reminder why fire in these conditions is unstoppable. At the end of October, the Santa Ana returned, and the fire department placed red flags at the one and only entrance and exit of the Hidden Hills, as a warning not to burn fires outdoors, to abstain from outside work that could accidentally start a fire, and to be vigilant. That's what we call a red flag warning. Still, a man's got to make a living, even with the wind blowing, and two of Miguel's crew went to work with a long-blade chainsaw and a high-powered weed whacker with metal blade to clear land for a homeowner. A good idea to create defensible space, but not during a Santa Ana, when the weed whacker or chainsaw hits a rock, sets off a spark, and the next thing you know you've got a little fire on your hands. And what started small as a match becomes a wildfire that can't be put back in the bottle. If you think Miguel is the villain of this story and he started it, that's a good guess. I could hear the chainsaw buzzing, so I got in my Jeep and drove over to ask the guys to stop. Hey, amigo, there's a red flag warning. No chainsaw today. No problem, it's okay. See, there is a problem. It's not okay. You can work by hand, but not with the machine. No máquina. You can start a fire. No problem, no fire, he said, and continued to cut down tree limbs and bushes aspiring to be trees, while the other guy attacked Mexican overgrown scrub. There was no need to get into a Mexican standoff with these hombres, and not seeing the owner, I stepped away and called our friend the fire chief, who immediately dispatched a fire marshal over to speak with the guys. Turns out, as I figured, the owner didn't know what a red flag warning was because he was new. All was good in our area, and in hindsight, maybe it would have been better if we had been ground zero, because the brave, efficient, and quick-reacting men and women of the Deer Springs Fire Department could extinguish a blaze quickly, at least under normal conditions. Out in the backcountry, conditions were anything but normal, as gusts topping 100 miles per hour pushed power lines like kids on swings, then kids jumping rope with electric lines swinging like that. One arced, and with humidity that low, grass in the area was tinder that caught, and what in normal conditions would have been a campfire was fanned by the devil. Wine growers on Ramona's edges were the first to be hit and fled for their lives. Bellows stoked the flames, and soon towering smoke clouds could be seen from downtown San Diego skyscrapers and 40 miles north at the top of Blue Merle Mountain. When Paul returned from his visit to Marcy, he told Sheila it would be prudent to pack, just in case, and he texted Carrie Ann, Steph, and Merlot Mac pictures of the blooming mushroom. Evacuation orders were issued, and the exodus began with two main routes out of Ramona towards the coast. Fleeing up to Wooded Julian was the equivalent of jumping out of the pan into the broiler, so the main route to safety was down. As fire spread, cautious residents in high-risk areas made preparations to evacuate. What would Sheila and Paul pack? What would you pack? She had already thrown out his photos, so that didn't matter. Passports? Check. Birth certificates? Check. Marriage certificate? Paul wasn't sure if it was in their closet or Sheila had shredded it. He found it rolled up in a scroll. If I let it burn, would we be divorced? He wisely kept his humor to himself. Don't forget Bluey's papers, Sheila reminded him. American Kennel Club, Australian Shepherd, the real McCoy, check. Winery license, check. TTB records, check. Corporate tax records, check. Personal tax records, check. Sheila's medication, check. Mortgage documentation. How do you burn a house underwater? Buy a home in San Diego's countryside during the boom and wait. Medical insurance cards, check. Cell phone charger, check. Sheila, be sure to charge your phone, Paul reminded her. Case of water, check. Dog food, check. Don't forget Bluey's Louis Vuitton V, Sheila yelled over the noise of the vacuum. And his toothbrush. Why are you vacuuming? When firemen enter a house, I want it clean. Paul shook his head and bit his tongue, but her words reminded him to unlock the garage and all the doors so firemen could get in. Homeowner's insurance policy, check. Don't forget the toilet paper, Sheila yelled from her closet. Since they didn't have TV, Paul turned on the radio for updates. As thousands, then tens of thousands, willfully or mandatorily evacuated, a call had gone out for donations of children's toys, diapers, and blankets needed at shelters. A shelter was set up at Escondido High School, and since all was calm in his neighborhood, the least Paul could do was gather items to donate, besides wine. Diapers were one thing he and Sheila didn't have, although they were one quite a oops away from Planned Parenthood. He opened a hallway closet, grabbing blankets from one drawer, then pulled out another drawer, revealing a world inhabited by beanie babies, dozens of them, living a parallel life to the humans outside. There was a farmer, princess, and unicorn, who together ruled the Noah's Ark of animals Alex and Kate played with as children. Paul reached for the unicorn, saying, I'd love to give you to Jane, but a child needs you now. He reached for Nuts, the squirrel. You're just a rat with a bushy tail. Time for you to go. And put Nuts into a large plastic bag with all the stuffed animals, having no need for them here. He grabbed as many towels as he could carry, and he and Bluey drove down the mountain. The normally bustling 15 was empty and eerie, drifting smoke currents. All he could see, the smell, darkness, and stillness, reminding him of Beijing in heavy evening smog. Before all the cars. Bluey enjoyed the role of comfort dog, herding kids at the shelter, and they loved chasing and petting him. Paul enjoyed playing Santa Claus, carrying a bag of toys over his back and giving them away. Bluey enjoyed the role of comfort dog, herding kids at the shelter, and they loved chasing and petting him. Paul enjoyed playing Santa Claus, carrying a bag of toys over his back and giving them away. Back at the house, Paul observed orange flames dancing in distant darkness. He slept with one eye open on the floor of the living room, with a picture window view of the valleys for miles around. What he couldn't see was the firestorm racing down Highland Valley Road, through vineyards, avocado, and citrus groves. Most residents of San Diego proper didn't worry about wildfires, except for a little smoke. Fire was only a problem for those in the backcountry. Instead of snow days, school children had smoke days. Paul had the advantage to see it coming. For those asleep in their beds around Highland Valley and Rancho Bernardo, their only alarm was the smell of smoke as the fire unexpectedly shifted their way. Imagine waking at midnight in a house full of smoke. Startled, you rouse your family, pull on clothes, scramble to get everyone and dog and cat into the car, now. Imagine driving through the thickest fog. You can't see 3 feet in front of you. Driving in smoke at night is worse, and smoke chokes you because you don't have a gas mask. You can't see. You're dangerously driving blind. You slow to a crawl, crack the door open to see if you're crossing the line, or pull off to the side to wait for a break, or you crash. Then you feel the heat. It becomes so hot, the plastic of your car starts to melt. The car ignites, and you're trapped, and there's nothing you can do except leap into the flames. Fire leapt into Escondido's Wild Animal Park, an extension of the famous San Diego Zoo that resembles an African savanna, with roaming animals now reenacting an African bushfire. If there's one thing that rips open the hearts and pocketbooks of the public, that's images of suffering animals, be they singed koalas in Australia or pets lost in the conflagration who miraculously emerge and are reunited with their owners. As fire penetrated the park, elephants, giraffes, and rhinos instinctively moved away, staying safe. Fortunately, the land was cleared, and with little fuel for the beast, it moved in another direction. Although the zebras were spared, the thoroughbred racehorses of Bonsa were not as lucky. The horror. The horror. The fire didn't jog. It raced down the winding road, jumped the 15, or to use Joe the Wino's words, snuck under the bridge crossing the interstate like illegals flooding into San Diego through Tijuana's underground tunnels, and attacked populated neighborhoods within San Diego's proper city limits. Then moved into Escondido's scenic community along Del Dio's highway and continued the route into prestigious communities of Rancho Santa Fe. Paul's father telephoned, reported calmly. I wanted you to know, son, we're surrounded by fire. Dad, stay there. Don't try to outdrive it. Your home is new. Stay and you'll be fine. We'll be fine to shake and bake chicken. We love you, son. After the call, Paul pressed coffee and sat with Bluey looking out the window and spotted flames to the east where there had been none before, noticeably closer than the glows on the horizon. This doesn't look good. At daybreak, there was no sign of fire in Hidden Hills. As Paul folded his blanket, he heard the crackling of static electricity and felt he had poked his finger in the socket, the humidity that low. He and Bluey walked up the hill for a better look and observed white smoke from the new front in the fire wars he spotted the night before in Valley Center, with waxing Santa Ana winds nudging it their way. He and Bluey walked down to the house, pressed fresh coffee for Sheila, and woke her. It's time to load the car. If the winds continued, their time was coming, and later that morning the reverse 911 call came with mandatory orders to leave, and the volunteer became an evacuee. Joe the Wino reserved a suite at the Grand Del Mar, a luxury hotel by the coast where dinner could cost $1,000 and rooms started at $400 per night. Carrie Ann, who sold wine by the truckload at Temecula's annual Wine and Hot Air Balloon Festival, was contacted by a winemaker she knew there, in the spirit of generosity that brings people together in a crisis, offered her, her neighbors, and their pets a place to stay. That sounded good to Steph and John, Merlo Mackin family, and Sheila and Paul, whose plan to shelter with his parents was impossible since roads were closed in that direction. Everyone put on a brave face and decided to make the best of it. Carrie Ann packed in a sorted case of her best wines, not the ones she made, but the ones she and Steph purchased. To save time, she threw a pile of dirty clothes into her SUV, reasoning since she wore them recently, they must be good, and she didn't lose any time choosing clean clothes from her closet. Paul grabbed a can of pâté de foie gras he was saving for a special occasion. What could be more memorable than eating the best food in the world and drinking the best wine with best friends as your house is burned? Carrie Ann posted a video. With my BFFs, best fire friends, #. John, always prepared for everything, was determined to stay and defend his house. Ignoring the warnings of authorities and pleas from Steph, who relented knowing she couldn't change the mind of her strong-willed husband. Though Steph and the others were concerned, they knew he was equipped as well as most firemen and mentally prepared to fight. While John respected the fire department, he knew he had the most motivation to save their house, with firefighters spread thin, unable to protect every home. Paul loaded the car, while Sheila finished packing clean underwear, toilet paper, and sanitary wipes. Into a plastic Ziploc baggie, she placed a sapphire ring, a gift from Paul she admired, a necklace of pearls, symbols of her tears, and pearl earrings, symbols of her elegance. She left her wedding ring behind to burn in hell. Time was of the essence with only one exit and everyone leaving at once. There was a traffic jam, and you didn't want to be stuck in a car when a wave of flames passed through. They checked their neighbors to make sure they were able to get out, and with both cars stuffed like students starting a new year at college, Sheila entered her black car and Paul the matching white with Bluey. They descended the driveway, then down the road, where Paul saw a neighbor struggling to load horses into a trailer by herself. Paul stopped to help, and as he took the reins, Bluey jumped through an open window and talked with the horse, calming him, so he peacefully stepped inside. While Paul helped load the filly, Bluey started trotting up the steep road home. "There goes Bluey," said the neighbor. "Bluey!" called Paul. "Bluey, come back!" The dog, with a mind of his own, kept trotting up the hill with the dignity of an Arabian stallion. Why did he return to the house? To protect it? Check on the neighbors' dogs to make sure they got out? Or did the devil make him do it? Paul called Sheila on her mobile phone, telling her to go ahead. He would join her and the others in Temecula. She, in a line of cars on the normally sparsely populated road, edged down the pavement, and not a moment too soon, as embers carried by wind singed the sides of the 15 all the way to Fallbrook. Paul, unaware the first flurries of ember snowflakes were falling, drove up the hill to fetch Bluey, after the horses were safely in the trailer. He found Bluey on the French terrace, and as he approached, Paul noticed the large wisteria by the side door that bloomed magnificent white and purple perfumed blossoms in spring had wrapped itself around the pole, the railing, and up into the house's wooden eaves. "That's not going to be good if it catches fire," he told Bluey. He gave the wisteria a haircut with loppers. "Sheila's going to kill me, but it's either the wisteria or the house. The vine's got to go, right? Woof!" Paul looked at the wooden barrels. On the terrace he had turned to the tables and rolled those into the vineyard, and removed other flammable objects adjacent to the house. He noticed garden hoses attached to the outside faucets without nozzles. Sheila had cut them off. What good is that going to do when firemen arrived and need a hose to douse embers? He went inside to fetch 3 nozzles, 3 hose repair kits, and a screwdriver, and lost another 15 minutes attaching nozzles. Paul peered towards the threatening east, and witnessed the devil incarnate riding a chariot of fire down Palomar Mountain, his wake fanning flames with wind gusts above 100 miles per hour. Paul heard a voice. "Take that, scarecrow," as the wicked witch of the West threw a fireball at the straw man without a brain, whose house was made of wood, and the flaming sphere flew across the sky, landing in the thick, dry chaparral in the valley of the death, the riparian wilderness below his property, creating a new threat. "Red on fire, red on yellow, kill a fellow. Red on black, okay Jack. Fire from east, kill the beast. Fire from west, take a rest." If only that were true, Paul thought, as the first solitary ember fell like the first shoot of budbreak. Pop, followed soon by a second isolated pop, and then an acceleration of pops, like popcorn. So it was with the ember drizzle that started small patches of fire that grew and merged, and as winds whisked leaves into the sky like sparklers. He opened the door for Bluey to enter the house. He wondered if his death would be from asphyxiation or 1,000 ember burns, remembering what Carrie Ann told him about the Apaches, who started with a scratch as insignificant as a paper cut, but killed you with 1,000. The first ember was not so bad, no worse than a pinprick. But 1,000 embers? As for the house, all it took was 1 ember to enter one of 3 dozen air vents that cooled the attic, which Paul futilely tried to cover. But it was too late for construction projects, for a scarecrow in a firestorm. He called 911 to report the new threat to Hidden Hills from the western flank and a Hail Mary move, with hope there were some firefighters somewhere available. A towering row of poplar trees planted by the first owner blocked embers from reaching their targets in the property's interior, but like any missile defense system, it became overwhelmed by the number of incoming warheads, and some penetrated and did their work. Poplars became Roman candles, firing mini rockets into the sky. It only takes 1 nuclear bomb and a singular ember to ruin your day, Paul thought, grateful he was still standing and not yet seriously burned. This isn't so bad, as he observed a nuclear Armageddon of mushroom clouds on the horizon. The fight was on, and he was all in, and instinctively acted to save his home. With the same foolishness and innocence, he decided to plant a vineyard and make wine. Ignorance was bliss, if he survived, because he truly didn't know what he was in for. Paul saved his house from the repo man during the great whoops on Wall Street, but could he save it and himself from the great San Diego fire? He changed into a makeshift uniform, using goggles and respirator for vineyard spraying, so he could breathe, maybe, when immersed in choking smoke. He found a long winter jacket to protect him from flying embers, hoping the wool wouldn't ignite, and a pair of goggles for Bluey, which would have been comic in other circumstances. He covered the dog's snout with a bandana and pulled doggy boots over each paw should he step on any embers outside when the time came for Bluey to abandon house. Scarecrow covered his head with a wide-brimmed Vineyardistas straw hat and rejoined the battle outside. Paul had created defensible space around the house, but had ignored the palm trees next to the side, figuring there was no flammable material in the trunk. He was right about that, but when dried fronds caught fire, igniting the green ones, they brushed wooden eaves with flames. "To the roof!" Paul cried, and Bluey cheered him from outside, which was the safest, and it cheered him from inside, which was the safest place at the moment. Paul carried a hose with him onto the roof, careful not to step on yellow algae made super slick from water he sprayed on the flaming palms. An ember hit its bullseye, a bird's nest hidden in the crevice between the eaves Paul didn't clean out. "Did I trade a bird for my house?" He doused it before it ignited. Embers fell in the dried-out ivy patch behind the house, causing leaves to smoke, then catch. Paul sprayed the spot fires closest to the house, then slipped on a tile, accelerating feet first down the roof. "Fuck, this is no way to die," was his final thought, as he sped towards broken bones at best, grabbing an exhaust pipe that stopped his fall. Thank God. He took a deep breath, composed his thoughts, pulled himself to his feet, then dismounted the roof into the ivy with a hose, sprayed, then shoveled dirt to smother the hot spots. He saw flames licking eaves under the section of roof closest to the ivy and doused those. As winds blew east to west, the fledgling flyer in the valley to the west of Paul's house was like a salmon swimming upriver against the current, for its instinct was to climb from the valley up the ravine, as surely as Newton's apple fell to the ground. When there were lulls in the wind, the fire took a step forward, up the ridge with the confidence and persistence of a Sherpa, one step at a time, and from Paul's panoramic rooftop view he observed a marshalling of Noah's Ark, a Ringling Brothers parade of animals, and unlike the circus march and Noah's census, animals fled in panic for their lives, surprising Paul with the numbers of species with whom he shared the land and never saw. Frogs, skunks, deer. He had never seen deer in the vineyard. No wonder they named it the Road Deer Springs. Following Bambi was a pack of hopping thumpers who jumped ahead of a caravan of ants, stink bugs, Jerusalem crickets, climbing up the valley and spilling into the open space of the vineyard. Then a pack of coyotes emerged, trotting up the paths of the vineyard. With the coyotes gone, a covey of quail scurried along the road, and roadrunners showed up the hill and away. When Paul saw a mother mountain lion leading her cubs from the flames, he became a believer in Carrie Ann's tall tale and wished he had his camera, but he had left the phone in the house and remembered his charger was in Sheila's car. Rows of lavender became lit fuses that raced towards the house. Where the lavender's field ended, a fat possum with fur on fire dashed into the vineyard, bumping into vine after vine. Is that a suicide bomber? No, these aren't gopher wars. Paul carried the hose to the critter and saw its eyes singed white. A face of fire's horror branded on his brain. He sprayed water, extinguished the flames, and smelled the stench of seared, soaked possum flesh, realizing it was a mistake to have stayed, and that he'd die at best, or worse, be seriously burned. Not owning a rifle, he swung a shovel to end the possum's misery. He dug a shallow grave, covered it with dirt, and sighed deeply in a pocket of smokeless air. He went inside to text Sheila. He and Bluey were stuck and safe at home. He texted Alex. He was proud of his service, and the dad was getting a taste of combat. His text to Kate was, I'm fine, but if something happens, please help your mother take care of the vineyard. LOL. Lots of love. Dad. And then he texted Jane. I once wrote you we'd be together in our next life. Looks like I'm on the way. Yours forever, till we meet again. Paul filled a bowl with water and another bowl with food for Bluey, gave him a hug, and went outside to face his fate. Wind shifted, now flowing from the Pacific, and the drizzle of embers from the west increased to a rain. Paul returned to the roof to douse embers and keep creeping flames away from fascia boards of eaves. He turned on an irrigation valve that rained on the ivy to make the area less hospitable to fire. A neighbor below had invested thousands of dollars fireproofing their home, encasing eaves with fireproof material and replacing old roof tiles. They had evacuated safely, and Paul noticed smoke rising from their house. With the ivy irrigation running, Paul left his post, headed down the driveway, and climbed over their fence. He saw they had left a hose outside and with a nozzle, and when he went to the back, he saw the flames and found himself engulfed in a losing battle he had no chance of winning with a garden hose, and walked briskly back up the hill to his house. Why would their house burn and Paul's old, vulnerable house survive? That's what one ember could do. Fire is fickler than love. Meantime, less than a mile away, John maintained a vigilance over his property, while the USAA insurance company sent a rapid deployment force of commandos to Carrie Ann's hacienda, covering it with protective fire retardant foam and clearing away combustible materials. Back on the roof, the smoke became thicker, and Paul coughed up black spittle, reminding him of the trip to India when he lost his smell, the foul smoke clogging his lungs worse than streets of Beijing during super smog. Paul looked out over Camp Pendleton. Where are the airplanes and helicopters? Be careful what you wish for, because at that moment, a converted commercial plane flew over and dumped 1,000 gallons of water, followed shortly by a dive bomber that released a payload of red fire retardant down the valley. Thank goodness they missed the vines. How would I ever clean that up? The fire slowed, like a snake wounded by a shovel, and a crew arrived on the scene to cut off the head and mop up. Paul and the community of Hidden Hills were lucky. The winds had shifted, and the threat from the east turned and consumed itself. It turns out a vineyard is a pretty good firebreaker, and the winemakers' homes were spared, as was most of the community this time. "We have to stop meeting like this," Paul shouted at Joe the paramedic, who gave CPR to Sheila the last time they met. "How's the young lady?" "As good as ever and evacuated. We'll take it over from here. Come on over when all this is finished for some steak and a glass of wine. Meantime, I'll mop up around the house. Check your attic for embers." Cell phone batteries were not as good then as they are now, and by the time Paul finished mopping up and checking the attic, his phone was dead. He spent the night next to Bluey by the window, in case windows picked up and the ceasefire was broken. In the morning, Paul attached booties to Bluey's feet, and they emerged from the house into the smell of burnt wood. That's the aroma of an overly toasted barrel, and surveyed the property, finding charred skeletons of bushes and trees in the valley below, in one-dimensional black, with soft streams of rising gray smoke. On the altar of Golgotha Rock, they found the charcoal corpse of a squirrel. Paul scooped up with his shovel, and instead of throwing it into the entrance of Squirrel City, he dug a grave, because even your enemies deserve proper burial. A helicopter circled the area with an eye out for flare-ups. Chateau Bluey had burned, and Paul, numb to all he had seen, felt nothing, only his breathing. He stirred the ashes, curious what he might find, and uncovered a singed photo of a woman with shoulder-length black hair, dark almond eyes, pearl complexion, a small nose, pink lips, filling a full-length embroidered silk dress with a slit up the leg, posing on a bench by a lake rimmed with green trees. Paul felt a loss, not for the photos, elementary school art projects, or for memories which he would always keep in his mind and heart. "Christine, I'll never forget you," he said, burying the photo under his favorite vine. "Bluey, come." And they walked down the hill to check on John and Carrie Ann's house. With the fire in retreat, evacuated residents of Hidden Hills were anxious to return, and as they exited the 15 or Center City Parkway to head up the hill, they confronted a roadblock, not to catch illegals, but to keep everyone from entering. Joe the wino, who supported law and order, was absolutely livid when stopped by the National Guard and threatened to call the Minutemen militia he funded to keep illegals out to help him break in. "Fuck this," Carrie Ann said to Steph when they arrived. "I gotta get in there and take care of the wine, or it's gonna get wasted in this heat." "Would you mind checking on John after we've saved your wine?" Steph asked. Since the front entrance to their community was blocked, Carrie Ann tried a back door the National Guard didn't know about. Steph drove her to Lawrence Welk, where Carrie Ann traversed through the scrub up to a fence near the top and scaled over. As she dusted herself off from the jump, a uniformed officer confronted her. "Ma'am, stop right there, please. You're not allowed to enter." "I've already entered. I'm here." "Ma'am, you don't understand. No one's allowed in here." "You're here." "Ma'am, I'm sorry. You need to go back, or I'll have to arrest you." "You don't understand. I live here." "Ma'am, it's you who don't understand. I have to arrest you. No one except authorized personnel are allowed in here, protecting homes from looters." "I'm not a looter. I live here." She pulled out her driver's license and pointed to her address. "This is America, and you can't keep me from going to my home. If you don't let me go to my house, my wine will spoil, and it's going to be on you. By the way, the fire chief is my friend, and he's in my winemaking group, and when I tell him you'd ruin my wine, you'll wish you hadn't stopped me. Ma'am, he's going to commend me for following orders and keeping the area secure. Carrie Ann, who was usually adept at applying sugar and charm, kept up her assertive approach. May I please speak with your commanding officer? The guard called the duty commander, who arrived. Carrie Ann pleaded her case, and the commander relented. We'll escort you to your house and give you 5 minutes to gather your things and escort you out. 5 minutes, got it? The guard couldn't believe the commander gave in to her and asked why. She can't be making this up. They escorted her to Cougar Winery, where Carrie Ann was surprised to find the air conditioning on and the punch-down tool covered with moist grape skins. Someone had been there, who didn't clean the tools as thoroughly as she. Carrie Ann went inside, grabbed a change of clothes, a couple of bottles of wine, and the officer, after making a quick stop at Steph's to check on John, drove her to the back gate of the Rimrock community that connected to Lawrence Welk, where Steph was waiting, fearing the worst. John's fine. How's your house? Messier than the clubhouse. If the Padres won the World Series, the corks popped everywhere and a river of wine flowing into the ocean. Oh, Carrie Ann, I'm sorry. Just messing with you. What do you mean? The house is fine. Somebody was there and took care of the wine. I bet it was John, said Steph. Power was on at my place and the air conditioning too. Just then Steph's phone rang and it was John. He said he was fine and that Paul and Blue were all right too. Carrie Ann says thank you for saving her wine. Wasn't me. She should thank Paul. They made plans to meet that night in Temecula to give thanks for their blessings and to their hosts and to mourn those who had lost their homes or worse. The bulk of San Diego was largely spared this time. 1,000 homes were lost and 12 people perished. Bless their hearts. As fires continued to rage in wooded hills around Southern California, causing disruption to daily lives, deletion of a lifetime of memories for those who lost their houses, gut-wrenching burns, and death. In Temecula, where the refugee winemakers gathered for a reunion, flames celebrated at the summit of a mountain range were visible. It was a miniature version of the gourmand's winemaker's dinner a la camping, with somberness. The main course grilled hamburgers, cooked by John, accompanied with store-bought potato salad and coleslaw, purchased by Merlin Mack, and baked beans from a can, heated by Sheila in a chef's copper saucepan, while their hosts set the table with paper plates and plastic cutlery. Carrie Ann opened a bottle she rescued, dividing the $1,000 wine into 9 cups. As Bluey lay down with the other dogs and the cats, Carrie Ann told Paul, I wanted to share this with you. He touched his paper cup to hers, and thanks to his rehabilitation from the scent sommelier, he smelled, he sipped, he swirled, inhaled, and slowly tasted, noticing nuanced aromas and flavors he had never experienced before. This wine is New World. The grapes are Cab. The region is Napa. It's not too young and not overly aged, said Paul. I'll guess 6 years old. Close. 7, actually. I've never tasted anything like it. It's good. Very good. In fact, amazing. I could never make a wine like this. Nor should you try. Not with your grapes. What is it? Screaming Eagle or something? How did you know? Because I know you, Paul said, thinking to himself, but really I don't. Thank you, she said. For what? Looking after my wine. You do the same for me, and you're welcome. Paul felt an urge for more wine and walked to the kitchen, where he found John by a bottle. We were lucky, Paul said. Just another day in Nam. If the winds hadn't died, we would have. You saved your house. I only went back to get Bluey. Next time there's a fire, I'm getting the hell out. Or you could prepare and fight it with the right equipment. Paul filled his cup and reclaimed the empty seat across from Carrie Ann. "To life," he proposed, raising his paper cup. "Life's too short." "Then here's to a long life." Their cups touched, and they sipped in silence. Glancing over the cougar tattoo on her breastplate, Paul looked into her aptly made-up smoky eye and saw the reflection of the flaming mountain range, as mysterious and as out of this world as the light of a solar eclipse during totality. For a period lasting as long as it takes the moon obscuring the sun to pass, he felt a surge of electricity race from his gut to his chest, signaling the totality of his admiration, his longing, his love for the woman facing him, causing him to forget for a moment in time his earthly possessions, his surroundings, his wife, and the fires ravaging the state.